The next element I'm going to show you how to make is the cup and saucer. So this is done using size 15 seed beads and a 6mm pearl in the middle. The cup and saucer are made separately and then attached together at the end. For the purposes of the video, I'm actually going to be using much larger beads because they'll show up more clearly. The one disadvantage to this is that the 18mm bead has got a much larger hole in it relative to the size of the beads. So I'm just going to use a little scrap of paper to stop the beads falling inside. This isn't something you need to do with the smaller beads, but to make my life a little bit easier on the demo, that's what I'm going to do. To make the proper cup and saucer, you're going to need to use a size 12 needle with your Nymo. I would recommend either cream or champagne with the cream size 15s. Obviously, you can make these in any colour to suit you. The colour of the pearl I'm using is a latte pearl. So it's a slightly milky cup of tea, but as that's how I like mine, I'm not going to worry about that too much. So if you start with about 1.5 meters of thread and tie your keeper bead about 15 to 20 centimeters from the end of the thread, just to give you a little bit to hold on to while you're working. Essentially what we're going to do is we're going to cover just over half of the larger bead with the smaller seed beads, and this will give you the cup shape around the edge of the bead. So I'm going to pick up the larger bead that goes in the center, so that's a 6mm pearl, and then we're going to pick up for the first strap 10 size 15 seed beads. So 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then we're going to go back through the 6mm pearl in the same direction as before. And this will pull the size 10s into a strap that sits around the side of the larger bead. So if you've done any of our beaded bead videos, this will look familiar to you. So that's our first strap there, so that's 10. And then the second strap, we're going to pick up 8. Now this won't sit right, this won't cover the whole of the side of the bead. This will sit slightly short, but that's fine because it's the series of alternating lengths of straps that give us the cover that we need around the bead. So this one's 8 there. So I took that one in. Whoop. There. Just make sure that's tight. Just keep the keeper bead tight, sort of the keeper thread, the tail end. Just wrap it around your finger carefully. Don't cut off any circulation. We don't want your fingers dropping off while you're working. Just to keep this first row under tension. It'll keep everything neat and tidy. So that's that row. And then we're going to do another row of 10. 9, 10. I'm just putting it down on the mat because then gravity will help me just get the beads in the right place. So there we go. So that's 10, and then we're going to do another strap of 8, and then we're going to do that whole thing twice more, so we end up with 8 straps alternating between 10 15s and 8 15s next to one another. And then the final row is a row of 8. And that's 8 through there. Ooh. Okay, so it's not quite. Just take your time to manipulate the beads into place. So there you can see you've got roughly half the bead covered. It's actually just over halfway, which is what we're looking for. So what we're going to do now is we're going to reinforce this top row and complete the row across the edge. This isn't sitting perfectly. If you look at the side of the teacup, you can see there's actually no hole. So I'll go through these 8 beads here. So that's the last row we've just added. And then I'm going to pick up 2 beads. I'm going to fill the gap that's there. I'm going to run all the way through these beads on this side. That's the 10 beads on that side. And we're going to add another 2 beads to fill the gap on this side. And then we're just going to run through all of those beads a second time to make it nice and secure around the top. So I promise you this is much easier with the smaller beads than it is with the larger beads, because you can actually hold it in your hand and keep your finger on it and tell everything where you want to go a little bit more easily. Okay. Okay, so there we go. Now what we're going to do is we're going to, oops, we're going to connect these beads together around the circumference of the teacup. So we're going to come out through the middle beads, the centre 3 beads on this row. So I'm going to come through to here. And then we're going to connect them with using a square stitch to the row below. So we're going to go back through the 3, we're going to go through the 3 below, back through the first 3, and then out through that 3 again. And then we're going to come down to the next row and we're going to do the same thing again. And through the next 3. And then just bring the beads around with your fingers through the next 3. I just need to make sure this thread's pulled a little bit tighter. It's, there we go. And you can feel in your fingers, or you should be able to feel in your fingers at this point, that everything's starting to feel a little bit more firm. So the beads aren't sliding quite as much as they were, particularly with these larger sizes. And it's starting to feel a little bit more sturdy. There we go, and then just through the top, the last row on the other side here. There we go, and you can see that it's closed everything up, so it's sitting more cup shaped. Again, the proportions aren't quite right, but you can see where we're aiming for with this one. So all that's left to do for the cup is to add the handle. So to do this, I'm going to come out through two of the beads that are sitting on the end. So they're sitting over the hole that's through the bead. So these are two of the beads that we added on when we reinforced the top row. And what we're going to do is, I just need to put a few more beads out. I've run out there. What we're going to do is we're going to pick up 8 size 15s. So and then we're going to offer them up to the side of the bead and see where we want our handle to sit. So I want mine to be about there. So I'm going to come down through that bead, which is one of the 10A straps, and I'm going to go up through the corresponding bead on the next strap across, like that. And there you can see you've got your teacup handle shape. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another strap of 8A. 5, 6, 7, 8. And we're going to go through those 2 beads across the top here again, so that we end up with 2 straps running parallel to one another, like so. And then what we're going to do is square stitch the 2 straps together, and this will give it some strength and stability, because what it means you can do is you can just pop, if you wanted to, a jump ring through that cup handle and then attach it to an earring finding or to a charm bracelet or something like that. It's sturdy enough because we're going to reinforce this. There's going to be quite a lot of thread going through the handle, and we'll reinforce the path a couple of times as well, just to make sure that handle's really sturdy. So it will work as an attachment point later in the design. So to square stitch these together, just pinch them in your fingers, and we're going to go up and back down. There, and then we'll come down through the next one and up and down through the one, the one below as well. You wouldn't think I'm actually less awkward with the smaller beads than I am with the larger beads. So that's 3 and 4 and there's 5. There's 6. Oop. 7. And there's 8. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to also square stitch together the 2 that are connected at the bottom of the strap, just to make sure they stay nice and secure. Through there. Just undo that knot. And then we're going to go through the whole handle again, and this will smooth everything out. And again reinforce it. So through the 2 beads on the lip of the cup, and you can already see that's much firmer there, and go through these on this side. And then I've got plenty of room in these 6s, so I'm going to go through again. If you can get through with the 15s, do. If you can't, don't force it, because that's when you're going to risk breaking beads. And if you break a bead at this point, you're probably going to be more than a little miffed. Okay, so then I'm going to come down and I'm going to bring my thread down so that it comes out at the bottom of the teacup. And I'm going to leave that working thread hanging, because when we've made the saucer, that thread's going to come in handy for attaching the cup to the saucer. And I'm just going to finish off this bead at the top. Thread the needle. There we go, and then we'll just finish this end off with a couple of knots. And there. And trim that off. And there we have one very oversized, very green teacup. So to show you, there's the original and there's the demo sample, and I shall be back in a moment to show you how to make the saucer. The saucer's made using circular peyote stitch, so if you need to go back and look at our video that we did on this earlier in the year, then now's a good time to do that. But I'll take you through it all step by step and you can see how it's made. We're going to start by picking up 3 beads. Now, essentially what we're making is it's a hexagon shape, but because the beads are rounded, you don't get the very sharp edges like you would if you were using delicas. So that's how we can make it work like this. So there we go, I've picked up 3. Because I've got very large beads, I'm actually going to go through them a second time just to stabilize that base a little bit more, but you don't need to do that with size 15s. Just joining them into a circle to start with is going to be absolutely fine. And so I'm not constantly reaching over myself, I'm just going to move those. So we're going to pick up 2 beads and we're going to fill that gap there. And then we'll do the same again. And then we'll add a 3rd pair into that gap there and step up at the end of the round. So I went through, what I did there was I went through, that's the original bit, the bead of the original 3 that we picked up, and that's the first bead of the pair that we've just picked up. So I've gone through the 2 beads there, that's called a step up. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add 1 bead into each of the gaps. So we're going to add 1 between the pair we've just added there, and then we're going to add 1 into the gap there, which is your normal peyote stitch. We'll do that all the way around. So we're increasing here from 3 beads to 6 beads. So here we go. And again, last bead. So we go through the first bead of the previous round and then step up into the bead that we've just added. And here we go. So there's 6 beads. And now the gaps are quite wide again. So we're going to add 2 beads into each gap again. So we're going to go from 6 beads to 12 beads in this round. So there we go. There's that's the second pair. That's 3. 5. So that's 6 pairs, which is 12 beads. Now, what you can do is at the start of every row, you can pick out the correct number of beads that you need for the row, particularly if the pattern gives you the number of beads, which will make your life easier, because you'll know that if you've run out of beads, you've used the correct number of beads, and with a bit of luck, you'll be in the correct place for the end of the row to be able to pick up there. So that's something to bear in mind, particularly if you're new to circular peyote stitch. Then just keeping track of the beads as you go along is an excellent idea. So now what we're going to do is, again, we're going to add 1 bead into each space. So we're going from 6 pairs to 12 singles. So now this is something I say to you on a lot of my videos if you've watched them. So make sure what you should be doing is completing each stitch individually, because that's the way to get the most even tension. So what you'll see me do is do this at the start of a video, because I'm concentrating and thinking, be good, show people what to do properly. And then about a third of the way through the video, I'll suddenly forget that I'm supposed to be showing you good habits, not my habits. And then I'll start going through 2 beads at once without completing each stitch individually. So please do what you hear me saying, not what you see me doing. And then you will find that you end up with a much more even tension. So it's also because I pull on my thread at the end of every stitch, my tension is quite tight. So this is something to bear in mind as well, because to keep this saucer flat, you want to work with a slightly, with a medium, with a tension. So it would be, for me, it would be a slightly softer tension than I normally work with. So it's just something to think about. So again, end of the row. So we're going to step up. And there we've increased from 6 beads to 12 beads. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to put my work flat on the mat, and I'm just going to give it a push so that the beads know that I want them to lie flat. Now this is the advantage of using Nymo, because although we have given it a stretch before we started, there's still a bit of give in the thread. And so as you press, it just stretches the thread slightly so that it goes around the slightly awkward edges, the slightly awkward corners, and does what you need it to do there. So that's where we're at the moment. So there we've got 12 beads, and now what we're going to do is we're just going to add 1 bead into every gap again. So we're going to add another 12 beads all the way around. So that's 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and so 12, and the step up. And there you go, you can see we're still getting a nice circular shape. So what we're going to do this time is we're going to add 2 beads into the first gap and 1 bead into the second gap, and we're going to do that all the way around. And by adding increases only in every other gap rather than every gap, that will help your work to lie flat. So if you're making something ruffled like the edge of a doily or the edge of a skirt, something like that, for example, if you continue to add a bead into every row, the space that's available is smaller than the size of the beads, and that's when you start to get a ruffle. So you'll get an undulating edge, which is really pretty, but not quite what we're looking for this project. So that's something to bear in mind as well. So I'm going to pick up 2 beads and then 1 bead and then 2 beads and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1. Now these slightly larger seed beads are a bit more irregular than the Japanese 15s that I'm recommending you use for the project. So mine is a little bit higgledy-piggledy. You can see that bead there is a little bit narrower. So that's, don't be concerned at the way mine's looking. I mean, it's lime green for a start. So that's not everybody's cup of tea. Okay, and there we go. That's the last bead added on the round. Again, put it down on the mat, give it a squash, make sure that the beads are lying flat. And we've now increased from 12 beads on the previous round to 18 beads on this round. So I'm going to put one bead into each gap. So I'll just put a few more beads out again. And then that will be the end of the increase for the saucer. Now, if you wanted to, in the videos that I've done on the cake, I've suggested that you could maybe pile up some cakes on a plate if you wanted to do that. So what you would do is do another round of increasing to make it slightly larger if you needed to. So to do that, you would add a single bead in this round to split these ones, then another single round, and then you would add a pair of beads and then 2 single beads, and that would keep the work flat. So that's something you can try for yourself. If you try it and it works for you, let us know. If it doesn't work, also let us know, and we'll see if we can help you work out what's happening. So here we go. We're adding 1 bead into every gap. So like before, we're splitting the pairs of beads that we added in the last round. And I should have just enough thread to do this. Because if I run out just before the end, that's going to be rather annoying. I'm going to keep going. Does help if you concentrate and put the bead in the right place. Okay, so here's the final bead of the row. So that's 18 beads we've got now, and you can see that if I just put the cup on top is about the right size for the saucer. So use your own judgment. This is the pattern that works for me. I'm quite happy with the way that looks. But if you want to use a bigger saucer, then do. If you want to leave the saucer off, then you can always do that as well. This is sort of quintessential English old tea party. So that's why I've added a cup and saucer. I don't think I've used one for a very long time. And then I'm just going to finish off this thread end because we've got plenty of thread left on the teacup to be able to use that. So I'm just going to tie a couple of knots in the work, but I'm going to avoid tying knots in the centre here because this is where we're going to attach the cup to the saucer. We don't want to block any holes in the middle of the work. So I'll just come through another couple of beads like that. And trim that end off. And then we'll take the keep bead off the tail thread. And we'll finish this thread end off as well. So I'll come. Make sure you're still working in the same direction because you don't want to undo the work. We'll come through a couple of beads there. And tie a knot, and through another couple of beads, and tie another knot, and then just come this way. You may have noticed I move the work around a lot in my hands as I'm doing it. This is what's comfortable for me to do, so don't feel like you have to, oops, there we go. I've taken that thread around the outside of that bead by mistake, so we'll just pull that back We don't want any thread visible there. I work in my hands a lot, so I move the work around to see what I'm doing. If this doesn't suit you, if you prefer to work with your beads flat on the mat, then do that. You'll find what works for you, and that will make you happy. So there we go. So we've got a cup and we've got a saucer. So now we just need to attach them together to make a cup and saucer. So let's try again and thread that. Now what I'm going to do, because I'm coming out of the centre bottom of the cup, I'm actually going to go down through the middle of the saucer. And this bit is going to be a little bit tricky to see because I'm basically going to be working in that gap between the two, which is going to be a little bit awkward. And it is a little bit, you've just got to sort of use your judgment. So I'm going to go through that bead on the saucer and then through that next one. So these are the 3 central beads that we started with there. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to go through those beads on the cup again. And what that should do is it makes like a square stitch, so it pulls them together so they sit next to one another. And then we'll come through. I'm coming out of, on the saucer, I'm coming out of this bead here, and I've come out to the left as I'm looking at the work. So I'm going to go in on the right, so that will centralise it over the under the cup. And then we're going to go through, we'll go through another bead. That's the 3rd bead from the starting round there. And we'll go through again on that base. Whoops, try not to catch your scissors. There. And that will catch. And it's an attachment, it's very loose. So we're just going to go through another couple of beads as and where we can here. And you'll know when you've done enough, because it will suddenly feel like one unit of beads instead of 2 sort of slightly wobbly connections. So just go back and forth until, oops, I'll go through that one again there, and that's starting to feel more secure. So I'm going to come through this pair of beads on this cup, and then I'll come through another pair of beads on the saucer. So try that one and that one there, and there we go. And then if you want to, what you can do is just come through the handle, and then we'll just catch, I'll go back one actually, there, and we'll just catch the edge of the saucer onto the edge of the handle, just to make that little connection there nice and firm as well. And then we can finish off our thread ends. So we'll go through a couple of beads and we'll trim that off. And there we have our finished cup and saucer. So we're going to lily cup. Thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video. I hope you've picked up some interesting tips and techniques, even if it's just how not to do something. So let us know how you get on. You can tag us on social media, and we would love to see what you've made.